Alright guys, after 2 years of waiting, Morgan is finally coming to the NA version of the game, and I for one couldn't be more excited. I have this servant grailed on JP Max Fode, and I am excited to do that on the NA version of the game, but also hopefully get a couple of extra NP copies because this servant is really good. If that's all you need to care about, that's all you want to hear is whether or not the servant is good and worth summoning for, most definitely, they're very, very strong. They can be used for farming, for stalling quests. You can use them as your boss killer if you want to, as long as they got the damage mod. She can put up some really good damage with said damage mods, and she can actually do some pretty nasty crits despite only having like a 30% crit damage buff. There's just so much that I'm so excited about to talk about with this servant. As you guys can tell, I have been highly anticipating this servant for the longest time, and I can't wait to talk about her in this video. But before we begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that sweet daily FGO content where your boy is always going to make sure that you are informed on what is going on both the JP and NA versions of the game. Also, unfortunately, I am not home for the release of Morgan as she is dropping later tonight, but I will be home tomorrow and I will be doing my summons for Morgan then. So if you want to see me summon for Morgan and cross my fingers, hopefully get her maybe a couple of extra copies while we're at it, then make sure you peep that link down in the description down below where my Twitch is, and make sure you pull up there at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time where I will be rolling for Morgan and again, hopefully pulling her. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and start diving into this video, starting with Morgan's hits, where Morgan has a very solid hit base to work with. Nothing too insane here. We've got a double buster, double arts deck. Her arts cards are deceptively good though, because even though they have 3 hits and she has 0.53% NP gain, you might be thinking, okay, if we're doing crits, which is actually a very easy thing for Morgan to do with her third skill, we're going to be getting some decent NP refund, but it's actually going to be a little bit better than you think because Morgan does have a passive arts buff, and although it's not super massive, 8% is still going to buff the NP gain of those arts cards. So if you notice that they're feeling a little bit better than other servants that have a similar hit count, that's why. She does have a passive arts buff to really help her out when it comes to refunding off of her arts cards. And if you feel like her buster cards are doing extra damage, well, that's because she also has a passive 8% buster buff. She also just has this very nice innate ability to resist 20% of critical attack chance, which is just very nice. As a berserker, she is a little bit frail, even though she's got decent HP, I guess. It doesn't really matter because as a berserker, you're going to melt regardless. So I guess turning a one-hit KO hit from like a wayward crit that an enemy might throw your way into like a 2-hit kill will be very nice for Morgan and at least living some of those hits. Not to say that she doesn't have any survivability, but again, she is a berserker, so treat her gently because she will explode if she gets hit a little too much. You also know they tailor-made this servant for me because what is that? That is the 5-hit extra attack, and say it with me, that is a composite card that gens stars, NP, and does big boy damage, and with Morgan, you're gonna get some pretty big boy damage. Well, as long as you have her damage mod up. We'll talk about her NP damage in a little bit when we get to it, but first we should probably start off with her first skill. This is just a very nice damaging skill for Morgan because it's giving the entire party, including herself, a 20% attack buff for 3 turns, and also lowering the enemy's defense by 30% for 3 turns, while also charging her own battery by 30%. Just a very solid skill overall because it's essentially double buffing herself by giving herself an attack buff and lowering the enemy's defense buff. Now, you may be concerned if you're wanting to do buster farming with Morgan, you might be saying, well, isn't this kind of bad? Because a defense down, you can't carry that through all 3 nodes, so she's going to lose damage after you fire this on turn 1. Well, the nice thing about buster farming is that Morgan works very well with it because you get this first skill for the first wave and you get it for the third wave because Koyanskaya will help you out with the skill cooldown, so it actually really doesn't matter all that much. You just honestly have to be able to clear wave 2, which shouldn't be all that difficult. So it's very strong and more difficult content because you're double buffing yourself and really allowing yourself to hammer the enemy. And if you're using this for farming, you get it for waves 1 and 3, which is very, very nice. But moving over to her second skill, this is quite literally just Castoria's skill, where it's a targetable battery that gives you 20%, but instead of giving the entire party 30% NP gain, she gives the entire party 25% NP gain. So it's like marginally marginally worse Castoria skill. It kind of reminds me of like Chen Gong's defensive skill versus Waver's defensive skill, where it's like just slightly worse that it really doesn't matter. But I feel like Lasengel was being a little bit petty with this one. Or I guess technically it was DW because they were the ones that designed Morgan, right? And they designed Castoria and all of them. But I'm like, okay, I get it. You don't want to have her give 30% to everyone. Don't want to literally have the Castoria skill. But 25% for the entire party is still going to be very good, especially with what we were talking about earlier with Morgan's arts cards being able to get buffed by her passive skill. They also get buffed by this, and that's why even though the natural NP gain rate for Morgan may not seem very good, the fact that between these two skills she can give herself 50% battery and she can also buff her NP gain rate on top of buffing the NP gain of her arts cards, she's going to be fine. And especially, let's just cut to the third skill, because she can just auto bomb some stars and then immediately suck them up, because she is giving herself a whole smorgasbord of really good effects here. So let's just break these down. For one, she's giving herself survivability by giving herself a 3-turn guts that gives her 3k HP. That in and of itself is very strong because she is a berserker. Again, she is very fragile, so having some method of survivability is going to help her out a lot. She gives herself 3 turns of massive star weight. That is 5,000%. That is basically guaranteeing that you're going to be sucking up all the stars that she has, which is nice because she auto bombs 15 as soon as you press the skill. But then she's also giving herself 30% crit damage for 3 turns. Now, that may not seem super great because a lot of crit servants will have a 50% crit damage buff, the same one that Waver gives to people. But I'm not gonna lie, I found that Morgan with this 30% crit damage buff is still able to put up some really nice crit numbers. It's probably because she has a decent attack stat. She's able to buff her own attack, and then she's buffing the crit, lowering defense, is a berserker, so she's basically super effective against everybody. But the crits still feel very nice even though they're not 30%, and I'm kind of scared for the potential world where this was actually 50% and not 30%. I actually think that's fair and balanced because Morgan's crits, they definitely crit. They hurt really hard. And then finally, this last one is pretty much just for more difficult content, but what this does is every turn she's going to lower the enemy's attack and crit chance by 20%, and she'll do that for 3 turns, which is very nice because it means that not only Morgan, but your entire party is not going to be getting hit as hard, and they're not going to be getting crit as often, which is very good because, again, Morgan herself is very fragile. She can do a lot of very, very strong things, but because she is a berserker, she will melt if a bunch of hits are coming her way. She has the guts, but that can't protect her forever. And so by being able to reduce a little bit of the damage that's coming her way, she'll be able to survive for just that much longer, which if we go over to her NP, this is where we kind of get into the immortal setups, because you may have heard that Morgan plus Castoria and Merlin pretty much enables an unkillable team, and a lot of that comes from, well, her normal skills, right? Being able to buff the NP gain for, say, Castoria and Merlin and helping them get to their own NPs, giving everybody a little bit of extra survivability with the minus attack that she gives to everybody. But then it's the NP that really does a lot of work. Now, if you're using her for farming, the triple damage mod that she has between the Round Table Knight, the Fae, and the Man attribute, that covers a lot of servants. I believe the only servant she can actually double dip into with the Man and the Round Table Knight is Saber Altar, funny enough. Aside from that, you really shouldn't be double dipping between Man and Round Table Knight and Man and Fae, especially not Man and Fae. I don't believe anybody with Fae actually has the Man attribute, and for lore reasons, I don't think any Fae will have the Man attribute, so just keep that one in mind. But with these 3 damage mods, she has a lot of really good coverage, and she could do a lot of really good damage. The curse is there, and that's very nice, and it's a 5-turn curse. That's all well and good if you want to use her with someone that could take advantage of that, but it's the overcharging the party's NP stage that makes her so good in these setups where you just make them immortal, because this turns your Castoria's 1 hit of solemn defense into 2 hits. It turns your Merlin's 5 stars a turn into 10 stars per turn. It makes them really, really good. And any other people that you can find that have really good overcharge effects, they're gonna love being around Morgan. I believe in the background I should have my gameplay of me just stalling people with Morgan, and the team is just almost unkillable. Like, I took this team up against Demeter, and yeah, it took a little bit to get the job done, but I got the job done. Like, the fact that you have 2 servants that are essentially forcing Morgan to stay alive, and she, as a berserker, is still able to do some really nice damage, even if she doesn't have any damage mods, makes her super dummy stupid good. I don't know what other adjectives I can use, but this servant is very, very strong. I mean, overall review, you can use her as a farmer, you can use her as a DPS in a fight as long as she does have her damage mod, because if she doesn't have her damage mod, her damage will be looking a little bit bad. But if you gotta go fight a single boss, you can use your AoE Morgan to take on, say, a man attribute single boss, because she'll still do good damage. Kind of like Gilgamesh, where you can use him, even though he's an AoE, you could use him as a single target because his damage is good enough, especially because Morgan could do really good crits as well. You can use her in stall teams that are nigh unkillable, and you could pretty much beat any difficult content in the game with that setup. There's very few fights that I have not been able to roll up with Castoria, Merlin, and Morgan and be able to beat them, especially because very early on in my JP career, about like the entire first year, that's what I had to do. So I know this team comp is extremely good, and I can just sing its praises all day, every day. So is Morgan a must summon? Absolutely, right? Like, I have been singing this servant's praises ever since she came out, and it's not just because I like her, she's also really, really good. So that's a bonus effect, right? It's like, oh, this servant is not only really cool, but they're also really stinking good in the game. The only thing that I would advise people to maybe be warned about is that this is Morgan's initial banner. After she comes out, we'll get people like Melusine, Koyanskaya, and Oberon, and then Morgan will get a follow-up banner after all things are said and done. So if you really do want to go for someone like, say, Koyanskaya, maybe skimp out on the first banner, go get Koyanskaya, and then summon for Morgan a second time. She is a servant that does tend to come around a lot. She's also on a very strong GSSR this year with people like Castoria, Miss Crane, Tyra, and Karen, right? She's on a very strong GSSR. So even though she is very dummy, nutty good, I would tell you to keep in mind, like, kind of playing around what you want to summon on, because Morgan is one of those servants that you can afford to skip their initial banner because they do come around quite frequently. But let me know if you do manage to summon for Morgan in the comments down below, and if you are able to get her. I know it's kind of an awkward time to ask people about that, because it means this video will go up at like 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They'll stream at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But come back to this video and be like, update, I actually did get Morgan. Or, well, I don't want to hear the bad news. If you don't get Morgan, don't tell me, because that might give me bad juju. I don't want to absorb your bad luck. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.